Dave and Dave. A podcast in your face.
Welcome to Dave
and Dave,
a podcast in your face where we talk about some nonsense that's going on in the world and relate it to graphic audio. This week we're talking about Da Boys, or as it's known, The Boys. I don't know. I think they should change it. But we're here today with our first ever guest of the podcast and two-time champion, Michael John Casey, who has directed the entire run of the graphic audio version of The Boys. So he's here.
Hey there, fans and listeners.
and
my friends.
my dear close friends, I love you all. Now, I want to start off right off the bat and ask you, do you play any roles? Are you narrating?
I do. I narrate the entire series, and I also play a few roles with my voice pitched down. I play and doing accents, and I also play Mallory in the flashback sequences. Yeah, and it's funny because when we go back, when we were initially recording it, there was a couple of instances where the actor was unavailable at the last moment, or we were under deadline, or like I listened to it and I liked the actor's work, but it just wasn't fitting. And I thought to myself, I can do this. And so I would go into a studio and do some crazy stuff because there's a lot of crazy stuff that happens in that comic. And so sometimes sometimes some of the actors were a little hesitant about what I was asking them to voice. Because
going for it?
Just going for it. And I'm thinking to myself, no, go for it. No. Dirtier, grosser. Like a boot stuck in mud, only wetter. Come on, you can do this. And after a while it was like sometimes it was really fun because the actor would like let go and like really go for it. And it'd be some hilarious line or some hilarious sound they had to make. And other times it was we had to recast, had to get new people. And that's cool. That happens all the time in the world. But I also play, I think it's in release number 4, I play Mal Chemical, who is this horrible, horrible person based on myself that he's just a complete sociopath. And he doesn't have the same powers as he kind of can take any form, any chemical or physical form. And so because he knows that and he can get away with it, he can morph into other people. He can, so he's a really terrible character. And he had a lot of really great lines to say. And at one point I was like, well, I could give it to this actor or this actor. I was thinking about vocal tones. And I was hearing the lines in my head. And I thought, dude, I could crush this. Because I knew I was looking for.
That's one thing.
Bilbo looking at the ring going,
that's exactly what it was. I was like, this is my precious.
It be mine?
This is my precious.
Sorry, Dave.
No, it's all good. I mean, it was just speaking of like downright dirty and like hateable and awful people, that it's something The Boys just does such a good job of. There's like evil characters and bad people in other series, but I don't know if there's been anything I've consumed, be it, books or television or movies, that has just the most awful people in it. Like the writing is so good. It makes you, I don't know. And they're not even like, it doesn't make you hate them. It's like it makes you, scowl or cringe at just how like awful some of these people are.
Well, I think with the so-called heroes, like The Boys specifically, in the comic, you understand, you get a quick understanding of why they deal with things the way they do, so that when you get some backstories later on with Mother's Milk and Frenchie, but in the most part for like Huey and Huey, Mallory, and definitely Butcher, obviously, you get an immediate association and information about where they came from. So for the first 3 or 4 issues of the comics, you almost forgive the horrible things you're doing. Like if you didn't read that one page or you didn't hear that one section of audio, and then you've skipped over it, and then you hear what things they say and do, you're like, holy cow, this person's a horrible person. But I'm like, but if you just get that nugget, and I think that's one of the things the TV show kind of does a little bit, is it gives you this nugget of connecting with the audience. Like you understand the reason why they made certain choices. You kind of see their humanity. And so for a couple of beats, you kind of give them a break. And it's not until they do a few more things, you're like, wait a minute, this person is horrible. And so like but then you've already invested a bit of feeling into them.
Yeah.
So you kind of root for them when you shouldn't, which is really an interesting narrative effect that comes with the comic, especially, but definitely with the TV show.
I mean, Homelander and the portrayal by Anthony Starr, it's got to be like my top, I don't know, 5 villain ever put to film or screen. He's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing how much of a sociopath he is, and how he can switch and, take off the mask and be himself. I don't know. There's something charismatic, and you root for him at times, which is insane. You shouldn't. I mean, it's like rooting for Jamie Lannister. You're like, what the hell? I need to rethink my life. What am I doing wanting this guy to win? Yeah,
well, again, it's like the TV show really, it shows you a piece of his, something that's lacking in him. Mm-hmm. Something that he misses or desires or needs. And it's something basic that we all deal with. Like, he never really had a mom in the TV show. And the same goes for in the comic, he never really had parents. So his rebellion as a superhero against the corporate parents that he has is kind of understandable. And also because of the reveal that happens later in the comic and in graphic audio about
spoiler alert.
Which I'm not going to get into. You feel almost like he's robbed a little bit. And we've all been wronged in some way. And it's like these little hooks that kind of get you to root for the bad guy in the middle of it all. And that's where you're like, because I mean, I think something that Ennis was working with, and I think the TV show does as well, is that we all have a level of darkness, but it's heightened in these people who have heightened abilities.
Right.
Sure.
And so Huey makes a horrible choice in the comics a few times, in the graphic audio a few times, when say in the first time they fight the Teenage Kicks, and spoiler alert, he accidentally kills someone. But then, and like in the comic, or excuse me, in the TV show, when he makes the choice to kill a soup,
translucent.
Yeah, you see it, it's almost righteous. Whereas in the comic, it's accidental. It's almost righteous. In both instances, you feel for the guy, and then you don't get to, almost like a certain level of PTSD. It's a couple of episodes and a couple of issues in the comics before they're able to deal with that situation. So I think that despite the fact that they do all these crazy, horrible, and sometimes bizarre things, they still are having to cope with their own actions. And that's something that we as a listener and a viewer and a reader, that's something that we do every day. And I think that's a really good way that the author and the producers of the TV show, I guess it's Eric Kripke, who's the showrunner, have really made us root for the bad guys in certain instances.
It makes it more watchable too. I mean, when you can connect with them, and it's like an ongoing theme. And we talked about it last week when we were talking about the Batman, how a lot of this is continuation of like these human emotions and these situations that everyone can relate to, sort of taken to an extreme, right? And so it makes it watchable because you connect with the people.
The idea of like if superheroes are real, it would be a bad idea, is not new. It's been done, I would say, almost to death. And also, I feel like the Shock comic stuff was kind of done to death too. I think there was one they made into a movie, and it was totally different than the comic, but it was also like ultra graphic and had a lot of Shock stuff. But I would like to ask you guys, what makes The Boys unique in that respect? Like, why? I mean, we've seen lampooning superhero content for a long time. Like whether it's the movie Super, which if you've never seen that, I definitely recommend. I think that was James Gunn. We've seen it a million times, but for some reason, I don't know. I love the TV show. I think it's great. And what do you think makes The Boys unique? What is it? How does it stand out?
Take it, Dave.
I mean, for me, and I don't know if it's necessarily unique, and this seems to be an ongoing theme, but it touches on, ongoing social themes, right? Like it's almost possible to extrapolate the direction our society is headed to what ends up happening in The Boys, right? Like it gives you the idea of the super corporation that has control of all of these things and is running everything behind the scenes. Draws parallels to what's going on in society, right? Where you have these, huge corporations that pull a lot of strings. They're lobbying politicians, and so like I don't know if it's necessarily unique, but I think contemporary in that it connects in those ways with some things that are going on in our day-to-day lives and like some of the wrongs that we see in our world. And so I think, for me, it's part of what gives it that draw, or at least makes it interesting.
I agree with that. I think the comic focuses primarily on the question of power and like individual power and what we have and what we're capable of doing. And that factors into the fact that what's coming in with season 3 of The Boys. 3? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That The Boys having Compound V in their system is now a facet. We're in the comic. It's in the trailer.
Okay.
If you're on the internet, you've seen it. I think that in the comic that happens early on, and they all have it, and that's part of the reason why The Boys have been so successful at fighting. I know, right?
Paging Dr. Freud.
Easy. So there's like this. It's more about individual power and the idea of what that corruption means and why, when we're broken, what we do with that. I think the whole corporate aspect that Dave is talking about is something that's really more explored. It's not talked about. It's talked about pretty much through one character, through the character of Stillwell in the comic, and also in the graphic audio releases. But in the TV show, you see a wider range of political manipulation, product placement, the constant commercials, the ads for things, and it definitely is holding up a bit of a mirror to our current consumer culture, as well as to the level of corporate power in America.
Yeah, that's why I like it. I like how much it's lampooning corporate and how it makes us all prostitutes to one level or another. It doesn't matter. Like even the soups, these people that have all the power in the world, they still like gotta pay rent, so they have to do like a crappy movie or show up at like the corporation owns some fast food franchise. They got to go there and do their thing. And then that's more, that's something everybody can relate to. The hypocrisy, it's not, you're part of it. You know what I mean? It's not just the corporation. You are part of the corporate machine.
Yeah, I think that it comes, especially when you see the fans. There are fans definitely in the comics and in the graphic audio releases, but also in the TV show, wherein people want to, take a selfie with a soup, or they go to a rally, or they go to an event. I mean, it's no different than some of the corporate stuff that happens currently, where you are engaged with, like, I'd like to take a picture with a star, or a movie star, or a musician, or whatever.
Influencer, which I feel
influencer, which is another thing. And I think that, like, especially in the TV show, they use the red carpet a lot, like when there's like a movie release from one of these characters, or, they're going to say, they're introducing something, they're always got like a backdrop with like, words and stuff that have like, a product of some kind. There's tons of Easter eggs in the show in that way. And I think that's, I don't know, you just said, Fernandez, you said a minute ago how it's lampooning us. And I don't think it's necessarily lampooning us. I think it's pointing a finger. I mean, like there's a...
it's pointing a finger at the bad part of ourselves, like because everybody is complicit. It's not like, yes, the corporation is taking advantage of everybody and manipulating everybody, but they're making the choice, like whether it's like, well, I got to do it. You know what I mean?
Right.
They're still a part of the problem.
Yeah, I agree. So I guess I was just thinking, like, it wasn't so much for humor's sake as it was for. I think they're definitely pointing the finger, saying like, you're complicit in this too. It's an accusation as opposed to it's one thing to laugh at something, but it's like you have to look in the mirror and laugh at this if you really want to laugh at it. And I think that's something that Enith does well. And some of the art really does that in the comic by where they put the perspective of whoever's talking. And I think that creates a level of like, oh, I see who is being accused of what in this scene. And it's not necessarily, it's me who's reading or listening. Like I'm the person that's feeding into this because I'm the one who's I'm the spectator. I think it's interesting. I didn't mean to disagree wholeheartedly.
No, I should have I should have not said lampoon. I should have said, it is definitely accusatory. It's definitely pointing the finger. So I mean,
what you should have said was nothing. Okay,
fine.
I'm just all right. Let's not be mad. Something about when you're listening to The Boys and also when you're watching the show, and especially when you're reading the comics, is that you're seeing all these parallels to other superheroes that have, that are part of the larger universes like Marvel and DC. And they're you don't see it. Sometimes when I was reading it, I was looking at a panel, I'm like, oh, that's so-and-so. Like that's, this character from that, that comic universe. And then suddenly things start to take shape differently when you're listening and when you're reading it, is that like you start putting together the idea of how corporate culture communicates certain ideas through these characters. So I think that's a really interesting thing, especially when you're watching the TV show too.
Yeah, I like how they are directly referencing certain things like the cringeworthy like girl power moment from the Avengers Endgame.
Yeah,
where like all the ladies come out and it's supposed to be inspiring, but it's done so poorly that is actually hurting whatever message they're trying to send out.
Hey man, girls get it done. That was from the show. Yeah.
And then that's what's brilliant about The Boys. The Boys had that same moment where there was girl power, but they nailed it by 3 girls stomping on a Nazi's head. I don't know. I just think it was done better.
I think one of the things that I thought they put it on its head was that let's say in the Marvel universe, and it was like, all the ladies, all the female characters getting together, they're all fighting a man. They're all fighting Thanos. Right. But in the comic, that doesn't necessarily, well, it kind of does happen where it's, but it's 2 superheroes fighting a man. But on the TV show, it's 3 supes all fighting another supe who happens to be a woman. It's not about the idea of their sex. It's about the idea of right and wrong, and the fact that these 3 women are gonna band together. It doesn't matter who's at fault. It's like we're gonna fix this no matter what. Right. We're not cutting her a break because she's a woman. And I think that shows more empowerment of those characters because they don't hesitate to go after anybody who's on the wrong in that one sequence. Which I think is really cool because it's I don't know, you could go forever, and I'd want to get a female perspective if we were going to delve into some of those topics, but like I feel like that's a really important point to make.
I really like the show. I wish I would have read more of the comics, but now we can check it out on GraphicAudio, correct?
You sure can.
And isn't there what's the spinoff about?
Okay, so it's not so much a spinoff as it is a follow-up. It's like almost like an extended epilogue. It was written, I want to say a year and change ago. I think it was published about a year ago, and it was another one by Garth Ennis, and it's it's called Dear Becky. Throughout the comic, you occasionally see Butcher with like a book, but we never talk about it. It's never referenced. You see him putting something in a desk drawer or whatever, but it's not until the Dear Bucky takes place 12 years after the end of the Boys comic. And Huey's now living in his hometown of Auchterlottle, Scotland with Annie January. And he'd intended to sell his parents' house because they had passed away in that intervening 12 years. But, the market's not going well, so he's just sitting on his parents' house. And one night he gets a package. And in the package is that book that Butcher had been carrying around.
50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah, basically. It's his wife's former diary. And the initial, 100 pages that she wrote all the horrible things that he read when he was first recruited by Mallory about, how she'd been assaulted and how she died, how that factored into it. Those pages have been torn away. We assume that Butcher probably tore them out. But all the remaining pages is Butcher writing to his wife, reflecting on what he's thinking, what he's doing, what he's planning on doing, all of which we know having read The Boys or seen The Boys or listened to the graphic audio. So it's almost like we're getting this, and a lot of the entries as well predate Huey joining. So it's really interesting to figure out like all of the things we didn't see and all the things we know that he did in the context of the initial run. Now we're seeing a little bit more of what's under the hood. And it's messing with Huey, and he starts acting differently. And then we find out that being sent the book was, in a way, someone's hope to kind of like open up all those wounds again in society. And so then it's Huey's challenge or you know, kind of his journey to discover who sent the book and why.
What is it? Does it help you recontextualize like everything you
because
before?
Yeah, because they do a lot of they don't go back to specific events in The Boys, but they have a whole bunch of flashbacks to, you know, actions that happened, interactions that we find out, the way the boys became to be the boys. Because when The Boys first starts, Butcher is putting the team back together. But here we see the team before it broke up. And you get to hear and sound, you know, we get to hear how those characters kind of became who they were before the breakup. You know, it's like listening to the early tapes of a great band or something. Like, you know, you're seeing the mechanics at work. And then Huey is reacting to that in the present about how that's messing him up because he thought he'd buried a lot of the stresses that involved being with the boys. So it's a good mystery. It's like a mystery and a bit of an action because you're doing like a action and flashback. But it's definitely an interesting story, and yeah. So it came out a little while ago, and it's currently out now on GraphicAudio.
Now, if you had to pitch a continuation to The Boys or a prequel, what would your pitch be there?
Jeez, I feel like I'd want it to be like a parallel journey. Well, we already kind of know how Butcher became Butcher. I kind of would want it to know how Homelander became Homelander, because they reference him being born in a test tube and like, you know, and being in this underground bunker so that he doesn't kill anybody. And the TV show references it a bit too. They do a little bit of flashbacks, but I wouldn't mind seeing the struggle of how he became who he became. And I think that Anthony Starr's performance, he calls on a lot of that. Like all of his weak, kind of quiet, alone moments are all of the things that were probably caused by whatever happened to him when he was so much younger. And so it's like, we're getting to see the effects of that as an adult. But I would say, like, if we were going to redo the comic or do like an early version of the TV show, I'd want to see how Homelander became Homelander.
I'd be down for that.
He's also amazing in a show called Banshee.
Banshee, yep.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with it.
Capital B, capital A, badass.
Yeah, it was on like Stars.
It was on it was on Cinemax.
Cinemax. Okay, another like.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna.
It's another platform that we don't. Another platform that like. It's hard to get to that. I don't know if you can get it through HBO Max. Actually, I think you might have to like find.
I think you can get it on Amazon Prime, at least like the first 2 or 3 seasons.
Okay,
it's worth checking out. It's definitely strange, definitely violent, and he does an excellent job. It's kind of it was a dirty pleasure, or no, a guilty pleasure for my wife and I, you know, because it is tawdry. Like there's, you know, just wanton sex scenes and just over the top like violence. Sometimes serves no purpose but to titillate, and that's pretty great.
Well, the premise of it's pretty
highly recommend.
The premise of it's pretty boss. You got to admit. I mean,
well, he's a criminal, and he pretends to be the sheriff of a small town to like reconnect with his ex-wife who thought he was dead or sold him down the river. So
like he's on his way back to his hometown. He stops off at like a bar. There's this sheriff that they've hired from another town to come be the sheriff there, like across the country, and no one's seen the guy. So when there's like this fallout with some random criminals in a bar, and this sheriff ends up dying, he just takes his badge and his ID and he shows up at the town like, I'm so and so, and he like, but he's not a good guy. Like,
it's a real Don Draper situation here.
Yeah, and he really, it's almost like he starts upholding the law, but he does it in a brutal way. Yeah.
It's a fun time. I highly recommend.
I don't know. In a lot of ways, I kind of feel like at least the motif of that is that he's a good guy with bad qualities. Like, and not to say that Homelander and him are the same. and that character are the same, but it definitely is guy with who you supposedly think is there to do good. And but I think Anthony Starr he's also trained in MMA, if I read that correctly. He's trained to be a fighter. He knows some. Well, I mean, obviously you see Banshee, guy can kick some. He can pretend to kick some serious ass, but apparently he really is trained.
All right, so thank you for being on, Michael John Casey.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah,
appreciate it as always, MJ. Hey everyone, it's Dave from Dave and Dave. Thanks so much for listening. We have a lot of awesome shows lined up for you guys, so make sure you follow us on Twitter and Instagram at GraphicAudio. And if you're on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe to get the latest episodes. If you're new to GA, you can use the code GADAVE2. That's GADAVE, the number 2, for 5% off your first purchase on top of any other current sales. Thanks again for listening. Be well.